Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you believe about freedom was crafted by someone who never wanted you to be free. Not truly. You wake up, check your phone, go to work, smile at your boss, laugh with your colleagues, pay your bills, and tell yourself you're making choices. But what if every choice you make, every belief about what's right, what's normal, what's possible, was designed to make you harmless? To make you obedient? The irony is that obedience doesn't always look like chains. Sometimes it looks like comfort, like stability, like a quiet life that never questions too much. You tell yourself you're free because you can speak your mind on the internet, because you can vote, because you can chase a dream. But somewhere deep down, you sense a quiet, haunting truth. You're allowed to do anything, except threaten the system that feeds you. And maybe that's the oldest trick in the book. Machiavelli once wrote that it's far safer for rulers to make people love their servitude than to rule them through fear. Fear sparks rebellion, but pleasure, comfort, and the illusion of freedom create something far more dangerous: a silent, self-policing population. You don't need bars if the prisoner guards himself. So you scroll. You consume. You perform. You measure your worth by approval, your happiness by comparison, and your morality by what the crowd deems acceptable. And every time you obey, whether it's to fit in, stay safe, or avoid conflict, you grow a little weaker, and the lie grows stronger. But here's the paradox. The more you try to do the right thing, the less you seem to know what the right thing actually is. You've been told that good people follow the rules, respect authority, and trust institutions. But what if those rules were written not for your liberation, but for your domestication? What if morality itself has been weaponized, not to elevate you, but to control you? Machiavelli's genius wasn't that he encouraged corruption or manipulation. It was that he exposed what most refuse to see: that power isn't maintained by force alone, it's maintained by illusion. By stories. By the myths people cling to because the truth is too terrifying to face. And the greatest myth of all is this: that weakness is virtue. That obedience is peace. That humility is moral superiority. You've been told that ambition is greed. That independence is arrogance. That defiance is dangerous. But look closer. Who benefits when you believe that? Who grows stronger every time you play small? Think about it. From childhood, you're taught to sit still, raise your hand, follow directions. Not to question the curriculum, but to master it. To memorize, not to think. To obey, not to understand. You're rewarded not for originality, but for compliance. You grow older, and the same structure repeats. New walls, new masters, new names. They call it a career. They call it a stable life. But maybe what it really is a beautifully engineered cage. Because here's the truth Machiavelli whispered through history: rulers don't need to suppress the masses when the masses willingly suppress themselves. The perfect citizen is not the one who obeys out of fear, but the one who obeys out of belief. And belief is the most powerful shackle ever forged. You might think rebellion means violence or chaos, but that's only one form. The more radical rebellion is internal, the quiet decision to think for yourself, to question what others call sacred. But how many people dare to do that? Most prefer comfort to clarity, illusion to responsibility. It's easier to live in a world where someone else defines good and evil, success and failure, happiness and meaning. You hand them your mind, and they hand you peace. A fragile, fabricated peace that keeps you docile and content while your potential rots in obedience. And that's the great lie, isn't it? That peace and obedience are the same thing. That morality and submission walk hand in hand. That to live safely is to live well. But somewhere inside you, a question begins to stir, a dangerous one they don't want you to ask. What if everything that keeps you safe is the very thing keeping you weak? What if the virtues you were taught to cherish, humility, patience, obedience, are only masks for your surrender? And what if the only way to reclaim your strength is to do the unthinkable, to doubt everything, even the values you've built your life upon? You've been trained to believe that questioning authority makes you bad. But Machiavelli would say the opposite, that it's the first sign of waking up. Because before you can break free from a lie, you must first admit that you've been living one. What if obedience isn't just an action, but an instinct? What if the very structure of your mind has been designed to serve, not to rule? You see, The real machinery of control doesn't exist in governments or corporations. It exists in the human psyche. The systems of domination we see in society are only reflections of deeper structures within us. The state, the church, the corporation, these are merely externalized shadows of the inner hierarchy that rules your thoughts, desires, and fears. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a vast web of inherited patterns, myths, and archetypes that shape how entire civilizations think. These patterns tell you what is normal, what is moral, what is acceptable. They whisper that peace is found in submission, that certainty is safer than freedom, that doubt is sin. And so, without realizing it, you obey not because someone orders you to, but because your own mind has already been trained to kneel. But who trained it? Let's trace the roots. From the moment you could speak, you were surrounded by invisible commandments. Be nice. Don't question. Do as you're told. Respect authority. Don't make trouble. These phrases sound harmless, virtuous, even. But each one carves a groove in the psyche, teaching you that survival depends on compliance. That love must be earned through obedience. And that's where the conditioning takes hold, not in politics, but in childhood. The child who challenges is punished. The child who obeys is praised. And so, long before you ever meet your first ruler, you've already been ruled. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He warned that morality itself, the good we worship, is often the morality of the weak, the defeated, the afraid. He called it slave morality, a system born from resentment, designed by those who could not conquer, and so they glorified submission. They sanctified obedience and called it virtue. They demonized strength and called it evil. And for centuries, this moral inversion became the backbone of civilization. You were told that meekness makes you noble, that humility is sacred, that ambition corrupts. But in reality, these ideas serve only one purpose: to keep the powerful unchallenged and the masses tranquil. Schopenhauer said that the world is driven by the will to live, a blind, ceaseless striving. But Machiavelli, ever the realist, stripped away the philosophy and showed it in its raw political form: the will to power. Those who understand it rise, those who deny it are ruled by it. But society doesn't want you to recognize your will to power. It wants you to distrust it, to fear it, to see your own desire for autonomy as selfish, your longing for greatness as arrogance. Why? Because a self-governing individual is unpredictable, dangerous, uncontrollable. So instead, they feed you ideologies that make obedience look moral. They tell you to serve the greater good, to be a team player, to trust the system. Each phrase sounds noble, but together they weave a narrative of submission, a psychological net that keeps you in line even when no one is watching. And that's the genius of modern control. It doesn't suppress your ego, it flatters it. It tells you you're free while quietly deciding what your freedom means. It gives you a voice, but only if you speak their language. It lets you chase happiness, but only along the paths they've approved. You think you're choosing, but you're choosing from a menu they wrote. It's not that you lack power. It's that your power has been redirected into consumption, into distraction, into endless emotional noise that keeps you docile and exhausted. You mistake movement for progress, choice for freedom. But beneath it all lies the same ancient hierarchy: a few command, the rest obey. And the most loyal servants are those who no longer realize they're serving. Jean-Paul Sartre would call this bad faith, the self-deception that allows a person to live comfortably within lies. It's the waiter who convinces himself he's happy because his role gives him meaning. The citizen who convinces himself that obedience is virtue. The human being who hides from his freedom because freedom demands responsibility, and responsibility is terrifying. So we create masks, roles, narratives that tell us who we are, what to believe, how to live. And each mask fits so snugly that we forget it was ever a mask at all. That's the hidden problem Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Most people don't want truth, they want security. They'd rather live under illusion than risk the chaos of autonomy. They'll trade their power for comfort, their voice for approval, their sovereignty for the safety of belonging. And what happens to a society built on this exchange? It becomes a mirror hall of dependence, each person waiting for someone else to tell them what is real, what is good, what is safe. The result isn't tyranny by a king, but by conformity itself. This is why revolutions so often fail. You can overthrow the ruler, but you can't overthrow the obedient mind. The new regime rises, the slogans change, but the structure remains. The few lead, the many follow, and everyone calls it freedom. Until one day, someone asks the forbidden question: what if obedience is the real tyranny? What if weakness isn't a natural condition, but a cultivated one? Machiavelli would smile at that question. Because he knew that the greatest rulers never force obedience, they teach it. They disguise submission as morality, disguise control as protection, and make weakness feel righteous. Once that illusion takes hold, you no longer need chains. You'll build them yourself. But if this lie runs so deep, woven through your psyche, your culture, your moral code, then how do you ever see it clearly? How do you separate truth from programming? How do you reclaim the instincts that were stolen from you before you even knew they existed? That's where the real danger begins, because awakening from obedience is not just intellectual. It's existential. It threatens every structure you rely on for identity and meaning. To see through the lie is to lose the comfort of the herd. To think freely is to stand alone. And to stand alone is to become powerful. You think the price of obedience is safety, but the real cost is your soul. You don't feel the chain because it's invisible, woven from habits, screens, and quiet compromises that seem too small to matter. You laugh when people talk about control or conditioning. You say, that's conspiracy. But look closer. Control today doesn't come with whips or cages. It comes with convenience. Your cage is comfort. Every time you accept what's easy over what's true, the bars grow thicker. Every time you stay silent to avoid conflict, your tongue learns to fear its own strength. Every time you choose distraction over depth, obedience over risk, comfort over truth, you become a little more manageable. And yet, you tell yourself you're free. But are you? You wake up to the rhythm of notifications, to-do lists, deadlines, trends, algorithms. You speak in slogans, feel in hashtags, and think in borrowed ideas. Every decision you make is nudged by invisible hands, by what you see, what you're told, what you fear losing. You think you're choosing, but you're being guided. You've become predictable. And predictability is the dream of every ruler. Because once your behavior can be predicted, it can be controlled. Not through violence, but through design. That's the modern genius of control. It doesn't restrain the body, it seduces the mind. You are not forced to obey. You want to. Look around you. The illusion of freedom has never been stronger, and neither has obedience. People fight each other more than they question authority. They confuse outrage for action, visibility for influence, emotion for thought. They scream into the void, convinced they're rebelling, while every click, every share, every burst of outrage feeds the very system they think they're resisting. Rebellion has become entertainment. Defiance has become a brand. And obedience hides behind the mask of self-expression. You were told that technology liberated you. But it did something far more subtle. It personalized your chains. It learned your desires, mirrored your fears, and fed them back to you until you forgot where they came from. You don't need to be told what to believe anymore. Your own preferences will do the job. That's the new face of obedience, self-curated control. The ancient rulers used force. The modern rulers use data. But both understand the same principle. The obedient person must never realize he is obeying. And that's the brilliance of the great lie. It doesn't tell you not to think. It convinces you you already are. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he described rulers who used deception not just to conquer, but to maintain order. Fear and manipulation were tools, yes, but only temporary ones. The true art of rule, he said, was to make people believe their obedience served a noble purpose. Once people believed that, they'd police themselves. They'd silence their own doubts. They'd sacrifice truth for belonging. And now, centuries later, that same psychological architecture runs beneath our entire world. But now, it wears a smile. The new ruler isn't a tyrant, it's a system. A network of incentives, desires, and fears so intricately woven that it no longer needs a human face. It governs not through laws, but through attention. It doesn't punish disobedience, it starves it. You feel it when you try to think differently, to move against the current. The subtle isolation, the social coldness, the quiet exile from the digital tribe. That's how obedience enforces itself now, not with force, but with loneliness. Because nothing terrifies the obedient more than being alone. So you conform. You adapt. You stay small. You stop saying what you truly think. You stop asking the questions that used to keep you awake at night. You laugh at what you used to believe. You learn to play the game. And soon, you forget that you were ever playing. This is how civilizations collapse, not with explosions, but with slow, quiet obedience. History is filled with examples. The citizens of Rome, entertained to death. The Germans of the 1930s, obeying in the name of order. The modern consumer, pacified by abundance. Different eras, same pattern. Comfort breeds blindness, and blindness breeds control. And while you think you're the exception, you're not. Your obedience may not look political. It may look emotional, digital, spiritual. You obey your fears, your impulses, your insecurities. You obey the crowd. You obey the illusion that you must be liked, validated, accepted. That's the psychological root Machiavelli hinted at but never needed to name. Obedience is addictive. It gives you a sense of safety, of belonging, of meaning. You tell yourself you're being good, when in truth, you're just being manageable. You confuse calm for peace, routine for purpose, structure for meaning. You think the absence of chaos means the presence of order, but it's only stagnation. And when the obedient become too many, something tragic happens. The culture begins to die. Not in riots or flames, but in silence. Creativity fades. Innovation withers. Truth becomes dangerous, and mediocrity becomes sacred. The obedient society looks peaceful from the outside, but inside, it's hollow. People no longer live, they perform. They no longer seek truth, they seek validation. They no longer ask, "Who am I?" They ask, "Who should I be to fit in?" And soon, no one remembers what rebellion even feels like. That's the final consequence of the great lie. It doesn't just weaken individuals, it sterilizes entire civilizations. It makes humanity efficient but soulless, connected but shallow, informed but blind. Until one day, a few begin to feel it again, that strange ache, that quiet unrest, that whisper that something isn't right. They begin to see the cracks in the facade, the mechanical smiles, the endless noise hiding the emptiness beneath. They don't yet know what they're looking for, only that they're starving for something real. Something unfiltered. Something free. That hunger is dangerous. Because once it awakens, it cannot be silenced again. And from that hunger, rebellion begins, not with slogans or protests, but with a thought. A thought so small it could be mistaken for doubt. What if I stopped obeying? Freedom doesn't begin with revolution. It begins with refusal. Not the kind of refusal that shouts in the streets, but the quiet, private refusal inside your mind, the decision to no longer believe the lie. The decision to stop kneeling to invisible gods. The decision to no longer obey for the sake of being accepted. That's where rebellion truly begins. Because you cannot defeat a system you still depend on for meaning. You cannot overthrow a master you secretly worship. Machiavelli understood that rulers fear only one thing, a mind that cannot be manipulated. A man or woman who has looked directly at the mechanisms of control and refused to play along. Someone who no longer trades comfort for truth. And that's what you must become. To break free, you must first confront the comfort that enslaves you. You must recognize that the world has trained you to be harmless, not because harmlessness is good, but because it's convenient. The system doesn't need your courage. It needs your compliance. It rewards you when you stay small and punishes you when you threaten the illusion. So start small, but start decisively. The first act of rebellion is awareness. You must learn to see the machinery for what it is, a theater of obedience disguised as civilization. Every advertisement, every slogan, every social incentive is a whisper reminding you who to be, what to want, what to fear. Stop accepting those whispers as truth. See them as what they are, programming. When you strip away the programming, what remains is terrifying. Because beneath it all is you, raw, uncertain, unpolished. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the courage to face who you are when the illusions are gone. That's why most people never break free. They don't want freedom, they want comfort dressed as purpose. They want permission to stay asleep. Nietzsche once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." And he was right. Because the moment you stop obeying, you'll feel the tribe turn against you. They'll call you selfish, arrogant, ungrateful, disloyal. You'll lose the safety of belonging. You'll lose the illusion of peace. But in that loss, something greater awakens: sovereignty. Sovereignty is not rebellion for its own sake, it's mastery over your own mind. It's the ability to think without needing validation, to act without seeking permission, to live without apologizing for existing. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the confrontation with the shadow, the reclamation of all that society told you to repress. It's not comfortable. You'll meet parts of yourself you've been taught to despise: anger, ambition, desire, pride. But what if those weren't your enemies? What if they were your exiled allies? The world has told you that these instincts make you dangerous. But danger is not evil, it's power without awareness. When you integrate those parts, when you bring the shadow into consciousness, you become whole. And a whole human being cannot be controlled. That's the essence of rebellion, not chaos, but wholeness. To break free is not to destroy society. It's to stop feeding the parts of it that feed on your fear. It's to stop playing the role of the obedient pawn in someone else's design. Ask yourself, where do I obey without questioning? Whose approval do I secretly crave? What truths do I silence to avoid being rejected? Every honest answer is a map toward freedom. But freedom is not without cost. The moment you begin to see, you'll also begin to lose. Friends who can't understand you. Comforts that no longer satisfy you. Certainties that once kept you sane. You'll be tempted to go back, to rejoin the crowd, to blend in, to pretend you never saw through the illusion. And maybe you will for a while. But once the veil has been lifted, it never fully falls again. Rebellion is not a single act, it's a way of being. It's the daily practice of refusing to live by borrowed beliefs. It's learning to think dangerously, to hold two truths in tension, to reject the false peace of obedience and embrace the storm of self-discovery. History remembers rebels as revolutionaries, but most revolutions begin in silence, in the space between thoughts. When a single person dares to say, "No more." When Galileo looked through the telescope and refused to lie. When Socrates chose death over obedience. When every nameless soul throughout time decided that truth mattered more than safety. Each one of them was branded dangerous. And each one of them was free. You don't need to overthrow nations. You need to overthrow the fear that keeps you small. You don't need to fight the rulers outside you. You need to confront the one inside, the voice that tells you to obey. That's where the real tyranny lives. So how do you live as a free being in an obedient world? You start by practicing disobedience, not recklessly, but consciously. Say no to the demands that drain your soul. Say no to the voices that belittle your instincts. Say no to the narratives that make you feel small. You are not here to be domesticated. You are not here to live safely. You are here to remember your strength, to awaken the power that centuries of conditioning tried to bury. Because the world does not change when you obey. It changes when you disobey beautifully. Rebellion is not about destruction. It's about creation. It's about building a life guided by your own vision, not someone else's approval. It's about standing in truth so fully that lies crumble around you without a fight. That's how the great lie begins to die, not by being exposed, but by being starved. And it starves the moment you stop believing in it. Freedom is not something they can give you. It's something you must take back, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet power of someone who knows who they are and refuses to kneel. And that kind of person, the one who sees clearly, thinks independently, and lives courageously, is the one every ruler fears the most. Imagine waking up one morning, not to the sound of your alarm, but to the sound of silence, the kind of silence that follows when illusion collapses. For the first time, you see the world without its filters. No slogans. No narratives. No comforting justifications. Just the raw, unmediated reality of human existence. It's unsettling. Because freedom, once you taste it, is not beautiful at first, it's terrifying. All your life, you've been told that obedience is safety, that structure is sanity, that control is peace. But what they never told you is that real peace does not come from control. It comes from truth. And truth, by its very nature, is disorderly. To see the world as it truly is means to see how much of it was built on lies, lies we inherited, repeated, and defended because they made us feel protected. The great lie, the one that keeps you obedient and weak, is not that others control you. It's that you ever needed to be controlled at all. You were born with a mind capable of vision, a will capable of creation, and a spirit capable of defiance. Yet the world convinced you that you are a subject, not a sovereign. That you must be governed, led, managed. That your instincts are dangerous, your desires are suspect, your individuality is a threat to order. But Machiavelli, misunderstood though he was, whispered a truth far more radical than the cynics who quoted him ever realized. Power belongs to those who understand it. And understanding begins when you realize that obedience, voluntary, unconscious obedience, is the only thing that gives power its legitimacy. Strip obedience away, and authority collapses into dust. That's the secret rulers never say out loud. They exist only as long as you believe in them. The moment you withdraw belief, the empire begins to crumble. Not through revolution, but through awakening. The real war has never been between rulers and subjects. It's between truth and illusion, between awareness and ignorance, between the mind that questions and the mind that obeys. And this war doesn't happen out there, it happens in you. Every day. Every time you choose comfort over courage, you strengthen the empire of illusion. Every time you lie to yourself to stay accepted, you kneel before an invisible throne. Every time you silence a thought because it doesn't fit the narrative, you surrender a piece of your soul. That's how obedience wins, quietly, invisibly, one compromise at a time. But when you begin to see, when you begin to question, to doubt, to dismantle the stories that shaped you, you do something extraordinary. You reclaim your sovereignty. Freedom is not a political condition. It's a psychological revolution. It's the realization that you do not owe your obedience to anything that demands it without truth. You are not here to serve systems. You are here to transcend them. Nietzsche called this transformation the birth of the Übermensch, the one who creates his own values instead of inheriting them. He is not ruled by fear, morality, or approval. He is ruled only by authenticity. He obeys not the herd, but his own inner law. And that, truly, is what the powerful fear most, not rebellion, but authenticity. Because an authentic human cannot be manipulated. They can be destroyed, but never controlled. That is the ultimate realization. The world's power over you was never physical, it was psychological. It depended on your belief in their narratives. It depended on your willingness to doubt yourself before you doubted them. Once you stop doing that, once you trust your own perception, your own reason, your own truth, the spell breaks. And suddenly, you see that no ruler, no government, no ideology has ever truly been in control. They only borrowed your power and convinced you it was theirs. Machiavelli didn't write to enslave minds. He wrote to expose the mechanics of power, to show that those who understand human nature can shape it. But he also left behind an unspoken warning. If the masses ever understand the same thing, if they ever awaken to their own capacity for power, the game ends. And that's what this awakening means. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about seeing the truth clearly enough that you no longer need rebellion at all. Because when you are free inside, the world's illusions lose their grip. You can live within society without belonging to it. You can obey laws without being ruled by them. You can engage with systems without worshipping them. Freedom, then, is not the absence of control, it's the mastery of it. You control your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. You choose your beliefs instead of inheriting them. You act from awareness, not reaction. And in that awareness, something remarkable happens. Obedience turns into choice. Fear turns into power. Weakness turns into wisdom. You stop asking for permission to exist. You stop waiting for someone to validate your worth. You stop apologizing for the fire in your soul. Because now you understand, the world's great institutions, its hierarchies, its truths, they were never greater than you. They only survived because you agreed to kneel. And when you stop kneeling, you don't destroy them, you transcend them. You become untouchable. Not in the sense of pride or dominance, but in the quiet, unshakable way of someone who knows that truth cannot be taken, only surrendered. That's the final liberation. When you no longer seek freedom from others because you found it within yourself. When you no longer fear losing what they can take, because they cannot touch what is real. That's what it means to awaken from obedience, to become the ruler of your own inner kingdom. Machiavelli understood that power is perception. He may have written for princes, but the deeper message was for those brave enough to read between the lines. If perception creates power, then reclaiming your perception reclaims your world. So the question remains, now that you see through the illusion, what will you do? Will you retreat into comfort again, pretending not to know? Or will you stand in the raw truth of your freedom, even if it isolates you? Because in the end, freedom doesn't need a crowd. It only needs one honest mind, yours. And when enough minds awaken, when enough individuals refuse the lie, a strange thing happens. The old world begins to fade, and a new one quietly takes its place. Not through conquest, but through consciousness. Not through violence, but through vision. And that is how the great lie dies, not with revolution, but with awakening.